Hey, it's John from Tinderbox Arts. So, I need to do an oil pan on this Grand Cherokee. And I'm going to show you why shortly. But if you're going to do this, there's some advice online. There's a lot of advice online, actually. And I'm going to try to do some filming here so we have some idea what goes on in the real world. And if you have a Jeep Wrangler, it's probably very similar. So it's the 6-cylinder. It's either a 4.0 or the older one is a 4.2. And they're going to be similar. But this is a 2004 Grand Cherokee. Alright, I'm underneath the vehicle now, and you can see, wow, if I can get my hand on here, here's the belt, right? So that's the front of the engine. Here's the start of the oil pan. If I work my way back, it doesn't look too bad until you get down in this area. Here's the differential, right? And just behind the differential, which is where, the road salt and all that would splash, that's where my problem is. Now let me get on here a little more and I'll show you something funny. Okay, so just check this out. I just have one finger here, right? Just light finger pressure. You see that in the middle of your screen? The oil peeking out? That's how bad this pan is. I'm just barely touching that. As far as strategy of getting this oil pan out, physical access is a problem. So most people say jack the car up by the frame to get everything off the ground as much as you can, take the wheels and tires off on the front, and then allow the axle to drop, the differential to drop, and that will give you some more space. Several people have said they actually raised the axle or the differentials so that because as it's coming up, it's going more forward, and that gave them enough room to get the oil pan out. But most people say to drop the whole thing, so that's probably what I'm going to try first. And some people report that they need to put a bottle jack or some kind of extra jack between, the frame or the engine and the differential, and force the differential down for extra room there. So you may need to disconnect sway bar or maybe other things too. We'll have to see. But in any case, I'm going to get this thing up on jacks and see how it goes, I guess. All right, I have the vehicle jacked up. I still have the tires on, but I have clearance, plenty of air there, so I could drop it down, the axle down more. So here's the front of the engine, right? Here's the belt, and here's the oil pan. Now you start to look back here, and you see all the stuff in the way. You got all these lines here, transmission lines and electrical. You have here's the exhaust, and there's the O2 sensors in there. So I'm trying to get you back over here. I'm going to go underneath the differential here, back on the other side. Now looking straight up at the exhaust. So there's there's two O2 sensors there. I'm really hoping not to have to drop the exhaust because I expect if I do, it'll be a mess. So I'm going to try to avoid that, but it's very close. Even getting those bolts out, up in here, there's bolts that may be difficult to get out. So the whole thing's kind of a train wreck as far as access. That's really the whole thing here. And as far as suspension, let me come back around here. So here's the differential, right? This is probably, it's pretty close here, but not in the way. This may be in the way, so I may need to disconnect that. All right, quick update here. I did end up, here's where the starter goes. I ended up taking the starter out just because it looked like it was going to get in the way, and maybe you could get around it, but honestly, it wasn't worth a fight for 2 bolts. So I took that out of my way. Let me swing around here to the driver's side, coming under. In this area here, where this oxygen sensor is on the exhaust, and then up above here, where these lines are, these are all free now, which was kind of a pain in the ass, honestly, to get all the factory connectors off, but that's done. Now, the only thing I'm not actually sure about, if you see where I'm pointing the screwdriver right now, there's like a little tab there, so I think these plates need to come off or they're going to get in my way. And up here, I actually don't know what the hell this is. I don't know if that's a cover over a bolt or it's actually the bolt and it's just covered in oil and I can't see it, but I gotta mess with this because this is weird, this whole area in here. I'm not really sure. There's some kind of cover there. It looks like it's got to come off. I got the 2 bolts out that are right by the bell housing. Now you see what I was talking about with it out. It's like a rubbery, it's like a little protector, a little plate protector thing. But the trouble is, up here, it's really tight to get the bolt. There was dirt and oil built up in there. It was really tight to get the socket on. You see over here, I got it in, but it's really a pain to get it in. So I think the rest of the bolts will be much easier, but it's just a weird plate and I couldn't really tell what the hell it was. As I took the screws out, I always just line them up here just in case there's something different about one or more of them. So some of these are the long studs here, which are, you know, for attaching some of the various cables and hoses and whatever. So I want to remember where those go. And then on the end here, this one and this one are different. Well, this actually turned out not too bad. So all I did was take those screws out, and when I just put a screwdriver and pry it on the edge of the pan, it pops right off. And this is exactly where I left it. So you can see there's all sorts of room in here. I have no problem whatsoever getting this out. So I guess it just depends on the vehicle. Now all I've done is to jack up the frame as much as I could. I didn't even take the wheels and tires off. Now it's just barely touching the ground there. So no problem. I did take the starter out, and I do think that made it easier. But you know, it looks pretty good here. So I am going to clear everything, it looks like. All right, here's the old pan. Nothing major in here that I found. Now I stuck my finger in here. This is the area where it was rusted through, and it isn't even obvious. There's oil in there right now, but there's just pinholes. There's probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 pinholes, and if you you know, stick your finger in there, you can feel them. But anyway, it's only going to get worse. So obviously I caught it in time, but I couldn't really wait much longer. All right, here we are underneath, and that's the front of the engine. There's the pulley right there in the belt, right? So I'm coming back here on the front of the engine, and your oil pump and your pickup tube is down here, right? Everything looks good. Here's your dipstick. Not the one behind the camera, but the one in the engine. And then there's the bottom of a piston. So now I need to decide whether I'm going to do the rear seal, the rear main seal. I mean, I don't really want to because it's more of a pain, but I feel like I sort of should while I'm here. This engine has this, like, you know, bracket on top of all the caps. And I have to take that whole thing off, it looks like. I don't see how else I can do it. And then take the cap off so I can get at the rear main seal. All right, I'm using a Felpro gasket, which is a nice gasket, and it gives you these little plastic doodads here that you can screw in to the engine block that holds the gasket in place while you get the oil pan up there, which is nice. And then I am going to do the rear main seal, so apparently it's a little bit different than the older ones, according to this. The 2000 model years and later has a different rear main seal, and there's a gap that you have to fill with RTV silicone. Alright, I got this girdle out, girdle or bracket, whatever you want to call it, 9/16 bolts down here, and then the cap bolts, the rear main cap, I guess is a 13/16. 21 is a little bit big, 13/16 is still a little bit big, but it's the only one I got that works, so that's the one I'm going to use. I got the cap nuts loose, which were really a bugger to get. I mean, they're on there good. But the 13/16 socket is loose on there, and I didn't want to use an impact because there's like a shoulder right here. And if you're not careful, you could stick this socket too far and crack off the shoulder. So I did it by hand, and I think I'm going to tighten it by hand too because I'm really nervous about it. But other than that, the nuts came off easily, and then I'll get this cap off. Oil is dripping everywhere, and then I'll show you what that looks like when I get this out. So here's the cap out. What I want to point out here is the way the seal goes. You see there's a little split right here. The bottom of your screen is the front of the engine, so there's a little split in the seal right here, and the lip goes towards the front. If you look at this one, here's the new one. Alright, up here is where the cap came off, right? And I did have to put a bolt back into the edge of the cap and rock it back and forth in order to get that cap off. But here's the area right here where the seal rides on the bottom, and that orange spot right there is the other side of the seal. So what you need to do is take a punch and a hammer and carefully punch that one side, and then it'll come out the other side, hopefully. And once you get, you know, an inch or so out, then you can pull it with pliers. Just be careful not to scratch this area and not to scratch the journal area here either. So I'm going to get a punch and do that. I'm not even going to have the camera in here. The oil is dripping everywhere, and I'm afraid I'm going to drip oil on the camera, but just carefully punch that out and punch the new one back in as well. Use your hands as much as you can, and then use the punch in the last part of it. Alright, the seal in the engine went actually pretty well. One good hit with a punch and it popped right out, and then I could pull it with the needle nose on the other side. Now this is actually tricky in the sense that, first of all, I don't want to scratch that. There's nothing holding it down, so let me change the camera angle. Alright, let me try that. So there's a wire inside this thing. Once you give it a good tap, see, good tap and it goes. Now I can use that by hand, but it's just kind of welded in there. Boy, this is really, it's not rubbery at all, it's hard. Alright, so basically I'll just clean this out, put the new one in, make sure it's oriented right, put the new one in on the other side, and we'll be ready to go. Well, I didn't have much chance to film the rest of that because I was in a hurry, but the reverse, putting it all back together was really not that big a deal. It was basically the same as what I'd already showed you in reverse. Now, the rear main seal, don't forget you need that black RTV silicone where the two halves meet. And you put a little dab there, put that cap back on. I used, just a socket, and I did that manually with a torque wrench. It does take quite a bit of torque, so you got to get under there and get dripped on a little bit while you get that back together. The oil pan went together very well with that Felpro gasket. And actually, I'm a big fanboy of Bleep and Jeep. And they have another video very similar to this. You should watch that. Good channel. And they have some video of putting that same gasket on, so there's really no sense in me repeating it anyway. But it all went together very well, and I didn't have to take those wheels and tires off, which was good. I did take the starter out. That was really the only thing. And I suspect that most Grand Cherokees in this time frame, in this year, should be about the same. So not too bad all in, and if you're going to do the oil pan, honestly, you might as well do the rear main seal. It's not a matter of cost, it's just a matter of extra work and getting dripped on by oil while you do the work.